What starts as a routine visit to the bank spirals into an eye-opening confrontation when Ruth Daniels, a sharp and accomplished entrepreneur, faces blatant disrespect. But just as the tension peaks, a twist changes everything. Board members walk in, and the tables turn. How will Ruth navigate this clash of power and prejudice? Stick around to witness a story of resilience, accountability, and transformation that will leave you inspired to demand more from the systems around us. Ruth Daniels stepped into the grand marble lobby of Pinnacle First Bank with the kind of poise that only years of grit and determination could cultivate. Her polished heels clicked against the floor, a rhythmic reminder of her journey from humble beginnings to becoming a powerhouse in real estate development. She wasn't just here for a loan. She was here to secure the final piece of financing for a project that would breathe life into her old neighborhood. Yet, as she approached the counter with a calm smile, she couldn't help but notice the slight hesitation in the teller's demeanor. Life has a funny way of testing you when you least expect it, doesn't it? Taking a seat in one of those sleek leather chairs, Ruth glanced at her watch. It was 9:55 a.m., 5 minutes ahead of her appointment. She prided herself on punctuality, knowing that time is one of life's most valuable currencies. As minutes ticked by, she skimmed through her notes, meticulously prepared for what should have been a straightforward meeting. But sometimes, even when you've done everything right, the world throws you curveballs. You see, Ruth wasn't just fighting for a loan. She was fighting against the silent barriers that still linger in spaces where they shouldn't. By 10:30 a.m., Ruth's patience began to wear thin. She approached the counter again, her tone polite, but firm, an art she had mastered over the years. The teller's flustered response hinted at something more than mere disorganization. Ruth returned to her seat, crossing her legs and straightening her posture as if to remind herself and everyone else that she belonged here. Isn't it ironic how life often asks us to prove ourselves in spaces we've already earned? Little did Ruth know, this was just the beginning of a day that would test not only her patience, but also her resolve. Ruth sat in the sleek leather chair, her calm exterior masking a simmering frustration as the minutes ticked by. She watched other customers come and go, their needs met promptly, while she remained invisible to the bank staff. It's funny how life sometimes holds up a mirror to show you the cracks in systems you thought were solid. Ruth had faced her share of subtle dismissals before, but there was something particularly grating about being treated as an afterthought in a place where she had every right to be. Isn't it strange how people often underestimate those who carry themselves with quiet confidence? When Ruth finally approached the counter again, her voice was steady, but firm, a tone that demanded respect without raising its volume. The teller's flustered response only confirmed what Ruth had begun to suspect. This wasn't just about a busy morning. It was about something deeper, something unspoken. As she returned to her seat, Ruth couldn't help but reflect on how often society asks certain people to prove their worth over and over again, even when their credentials speak volumes. It's a lesson many of us learn early. Poise and persistence can be your greatest allies when the world tries to test your resolve. By the time Mr. Porter finally emerged, his demeanor was as dismissive as his apology was hollow. Ruth met his condescension with unyielding composure, answering his unnecessary questions with precision and grace. It's remarkable how some people confuse power with superiority, isn't it? But Ruth knew better than to let him see her frustration. She had come too far to let someone else's bias derail her mission. Little did Mr. Porter know, the tables were about to turn in ways he couldn't have imagined. The air in the bank shifted the moment the board members walked in, their presence commanding immediate attention. Ruth sat upright, her composed demeanor unwavering, though her curiosity was piqued when she overheard her name mentioned. Life has a way of surprising us, doesn't it? One minute, you're battling subtle dismissals, and the next you're reminded that your reputation can speak louder than any prejudice. As Thomas Grayson, a silver-haired man with an aura of authority, entered the room, his warm smile upon seeing Ruth was like a breath of fresh air cutting through the tension. Grayson's greeting was genuine and familiar, a stark contrast to Mr. Porter's earlier behavior. "Ruth, it's been too long," he boomed, shaking her hand with enthusiasm that left no room for doubt about his respect for her. The sudden shift in energy was palpable. Even the staff's furtive glances betrayed their awareness of the unfolding drama. Isn't it fascinating how quickly dynamics change when someone influential steps into the picture? Ruth's quiet strength had carried her this far, but Grayson's arrival underscored an important truth: sometimes allies appear just when you need them most. As Ruth took her seat among the board members, Mr. Porter's discomfort was impossible to miss. His forced smile and fidgeting hands betrayed an unease that no amount of arrogance could mask. Grayson's pointed questions about Ruth's experience cut through the pretense like a hot knife through butter. It was a moment of reckoning not just for Mr. Porter, but for everyone in the room who had witnessed or participated in the systemic bias she endured. Ruth answered diplomatically, her words measured yet powerful, setting the stage for what would come next. The room was charged with tension as Ruth re-entered the conference space, her calm demeanor masking the storm of emotions beneath. Grayson's voice carried authority as he questioned Mr. Porter, each word slicing through the silence like a blade. 3 hours, Grayson repeated, his tone sharp yet controlled. How do we justify making a client of Miss Daniels' caliber wait that long? Ruth observed quietly, her composed presence speaking louder than any words she could have uttered. Isn't it interesting how accountability has a way of exposing the truth, no matter how deeply it's buried? Mr. Porter fumbled for excuses, his earlier arrogance replaced by visible discomfort. He stammered about due diligence and procedures, but his words crumbled under the weight of Grayson's scrutiny. Ruth watched as the power dynamics shifted in real-time, proof that even those who wield authority are not immune to being held accountable. Life has a way of teaching us that respect is not optional. It's earned and expected in equal measure. Ruth's silence was deliberate, her restraint a quiet assertion of her dignity in the face of disrespect. As Grayson turned to Ruth, his expression softened, and his apology was both personal and professional. "This isn't just about today," Ruth said, her voice steady but resolute. "It's about ensuring this doesn't happen to anyone else." Her words hung in the air like a challenge not just to Mr. Porter, but to everyone in the room who had witnessed or enabled such behavior. Moments like these remind us that speaking up isn't just an act of courage. It's an act of leadership. As Ruth sat back in her chair, the weight of the day began to lift, replaced by a sense of quiet triumph. Grayson's apology was sincere, his promise to expedite her loan a much-needed resolution to an exhausting ordeal. But what truly struck Ruth was his invitation to join a task force aimed at tackling inequities within the bank. Life has a way of turning trials into opportunities, doesn't it? Ruth saw this as more than just a personal victory. It was a chance to create systemic change. She accepted the offer with grace, knowing that this was her moment to turn frustration into fuel for progress. Walking out of the bank, Ruth's mind raced with ideas. She thought about how many others might have faced similar treatment, but lacked the platform or resources to fight back. Change doesn't happen in silence. She reminded herself it happens when people like her step forward and demand it. The junior employee, Erin, caught up with Ruth near the exit, her face glowing with admiration. "You've inspired me today," Erin said softly. Ruth smiled warmly, placing a reassuring hand on Erin's shoulder. "Courage is contagious," she replied, "and you've got plenty of it." Moments like these remind us that leadership isn't just about power. It's about uplifting others along the way. As Ruth left the bank that day, she wasn't just thinking about her own success, she was thinking about how to pave the way for others. Back at her office, she gathered her team and shared the story of what had transpired. "This isn't just about me," she began, her voice steady but impassioned. "It's about all of us and the systems we need to challenge if we want real change." Her team listened intently, their faces reflecting a mix of outrage and inspiration. Together, they brainstormed ways to integrate advocacy into their work, proving that even in moments of adversity, there's always room for growth and impact. Ruth returned to her office with a renewed sense of purpose, her mind brimming with ideas on how to turn her experience into a force for systemic change. She gathered her team in the conference room, their faces reflecting a mix of admiration and determination as she recounted the events at the bank. "This isn't just about what happened to me," she began, her voice steady but impassioned. "It's about the countless others who face these barriers every day without the resources or platform to fight back. Isn't it remarkable how adversity can ignite a spark for something greater?" Ruth's words resonated deeply, inspiring her team to think beyond their immediate goals. Together, they brainstormed ways to integrate advocacy into their work, ensuring that their projects didn't just transform neighborhoods, but also challenged the systems that perpetuate inequality. Ruth's leadership was more than just visionary. It was deeply human. She reminded her team that every blueprint they drew and every deal they closed had the power to impact lives in profound ways. It's a lesson we all need to remember: our work, no matter how small it seems, can be a catalyst for change. Ruth's passion was contagious, and even Erin, the junior employee who had supported her at the bank, became inspired to push for change within her own role. Meanwhile, Pinnacle First Bank began implementing new policies under Grayson's leadership. Training programs were rolled out, and a diversity task force was established with Ruth as an advisor. Her presence in those meetings wasn't just symbolic. It was transformative. She shared her insights candidly, challenging outdated practices and pushing for accountability at every level. It's incredible how one voice, when used with courage and conviction, can ripple outward to create lasting impact. Ruth wasn't just advocating for herself. She was paving the way for others to walk through doors that had once been closed. Ruth's story is a powerful reminder of the resilience required to confront injustice and the courage it takes to turn adversity into opportunity. Her journey from frustration to triumph teaches us that every challenge we face has the potential to spark meaningful change, not just for ourselves, but for others who follow in our footsteps. How often do we let moments of unfairness pass by without speaking up? Ruth didn't, and her actions created ripples of transformation, proving that one voice can indeed make a difference. So, what about you? How will you respond when faced with a moment that tests your resolve? Will you stand up for what's right, even when it's uncomfortable? Let Ruth's experience inspire you to challenge the systems around you, advocate for fairness, and become a catalyst for progress in your own life. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and activate notifications so you won't miss more stories like this, stories that inspire action and ignite change. Let's build a community of voices that demand better together.